Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this episode edition, I never really know what to say. In this video, we are looking at Analog Tape ASX72 by G-Sonic. Digital Instruments, no less. Disclaimer before we go any further, I actually had us, I didn't do it personally, I had us as Higher Hertz reach out to G-Sonic to ask if they could, approve our doing a review, but also pop over a review copy of the device because it was going to be a little less than pleasing for you all to listen to the audio dropout and the audio hiss and the fact that I couldn't discuss a couple of knobs because in the demo version that was a thing. So they were very kind and actually really fast. So they sent us a version of the plugin, which actually has our name on it. Look, Higher Hertz. How good's that? So thank you guys, and I give that simply because I don't want people to feel like, oh well, okay, he's giving good reviews for payback or anything like that. I'm as direct as I always am, regardless. I will look at this with regards to the two sides. But the fact that I reached out means that I actually liked it and I thought it had reason to be presented in the first place. So obviously we're kind of winning just a little bit there already. Demo. Because obviously you'll be like, what does it do? How does it sound any good? I've used it here in essentially the same way as I have used the saturation plugins. So initially, we will look at it just as a saturation as opposed to a splaturation plugin. And I've got a version of the mix where the mix was exactly as you'll hear it, but all the Analog Tape ASX72s, that's going to be just too long to say, all of the analog tapes were off. And then we can start to do a little bit of A-B contrasting. We're not aiming for heavy differences here, just to see, like, does it add something? Complete mix, reverb, everything, no analog tape. If we just put the master tape on, the difference is subtle, but there is, depending upon how it's set up, the way I've got it set up to try to sort of not make big changes, remember saturation, not splaturation, is that I feel like it brings a nice subtle togetherness into the mix, a kind of just a little bit of a rounding off of everything, a bringing together, a gluing. It's the only compressor that's running in here, so there was no compressor on the bounce, so we get that little bit of a difference. I actually just did a review day before for a completely different thing for my own channel, and I had thank you, and I had analog tape across the masters on that, in part just to check that I was hearing what I expected that I wanted to hear and getting the results that I wanted to get. Unfortunately, I didn't hit save at the end of that project. Otherwise, I would have shown it here because I think it did a very, very nice job. So even just on the masters, and I believe this may have been started as primarily a mastering type tool, I think we get a nice result. With care, it's going to require a little more care than just turning it on. Otherwise, I think it can be a little bit more splaturation than saturation. But we're getting a nice result. Now let's look at the difference between, we'll turn this mastering off so there's no analog tape on the mastering stage, and just compare the mixes alone between no tape and tape. So that's one instance on each of the key points. But unlike the saturation thing, I have not put one on the bus because we wouldn't normally have tape involved with the bus. In our mythical Neve studio, yes, there would be impact of moving our signal into the bus because it's going through the same dusty old components, dusty new components, undusty components. You shouldn't have dusty components, especially in a Neve. So it's not appropriate that we put the tape thing there if we were trying to emulate the real world. But we do get a nice difference in feel. So, analog tape happening? None. What I feel and what I hear, but it is reasonably subtle. So if you're not hearing it, you do need to have decent speakers probably, but if you are hearing it, great. You've acclimated to this difference. Is that we get a little bit more sense of space and depth, and it's exactly the same mix. So it's not a case of, oh, well, that mix is better done. I've already put what I think is reasonable depth and everything into the mix. So I didn't start this one, as I did with, say, Kirchhoff, with a flat kind of a mix. There is depth already in the mix. It's a case of, does this, as a saturator in its softer guise, bring us depth and space? Yes, it does. Now let's bring in the master. Definitely there is a change to the overall feel. Again, there's that feeling of sort of pulling together, of gluing. There is a little bit of change to the sonic profile of the mix, but that's the whole idea of a finalization. I prefer to actually call it finalization than mastering, is to say, okay, how do we want this whole song as one lump to be perceived? I was happy with the result. So if we go between masters on and tape on everywhere, the clean feels more forward. And yes, it is. There's more treble. Everything just extends right up, 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 up. I didn't try to make it sound not nice. I tried to make it sound nice and then say, well, what is this device going to bring? And so it's easy to think that with it off, maybe it's a little bit better simply because it's brighter. But if we think in terms of, if we're going to listen to this for a period of time, let's say 3 or 4 minutes, then overall, I'm pretty confident that the change from this, which sounds sort of quite, 2000 and something, digital, to this, is a warmer, more relaxed, more engaged feel. Another thing worth looking at was, of course, using the higher Hertz delay as reverb here, the free higher Hertz delay. Then if we look at just the analog tape on the echo, the reverb that we've got. Reverb off, reverb on. So it's not huge in the mix. Off, on. The reason I'm showing this is because I noticed that it had a marked difference, and I've noticed that this sort of thing has a marked difference in other situations too. But this has more going on than your average saturation plugin, which is adding some harmonics. So like the analog stage, as opposed to analog tape, the Hornet analog stage, which I like so much, doesn't really do the compression thing. This is doing the compression thing as well as changing the sonic profile a bit. So you'll notice that the feel of the reverb changes. And one of the things that is annoying about even the Hornet analog stage, is that you've got to put an instance on everything before you get everything happening. Now, while that is in many ways good practice because it matches what would have happened in the real world, and remember our magical Neve, our mythical Neve that we plug things into. If they're not plugged into the Neve, we can't hear them, and it's the plug points that bring the analoginess. So if we want that, then we have to go the whole hog. But if we don't want to go the whole hog for whatever reason, laziness, machine won't handle it, don't want to, whatever. Let's say we don't. Then if we were to say we will only do it at key points, then we know we get a good difference just on the master. We also get a surprising difference on the reverb. So my advice is, if you're not at the stage where you want to balance it everywhere, fair enough, or if you're just looking for a quicker result, whatever reason, pop your sound goodifier on your master, by all means, but pop it on your reverb, your main reverb that everything uses a bit of. The reason this works here is because it's taking that reverb sound. Let's isolate our reverb, so we're just listening to reverb. I'll turn this up a little bit. She's not working, not helping. And it's taking what's in that reverb and smushing it together, which means that that reverb sounds and feels more like something coming back from a room. It's taking not just one instrument, but all those instruments and smushing them. So you're getting the glue that we liked on the master, and we're getting it in the reverb as well. So when we bring that back in, especially if we then do that again on the master, our glue on the master, we end up with quite an extra sense of body and depth and movement, non-linearity, than we would otherwise have. Cool. So let's have a look at, I'll just close that down, let's have a look at G-Sonique and pricing and what have you. So G-Sonique, I think I've seen some things floating around and heard the name. It's not a manufacturer I've really paid much attention to. They are, they're on the small end of town, nothing wrong with that. I can't work out what they're using to build these, whether they're actually coding in some sort of an environment that sets up VST stuff for them already, or whether they're actually using a Lego type environment. I don't think it's synth edit. It doesn't smell like synth edit to me. Could be Synth Maker Flowstone. Don't ultimately care, because as I've often said, it's all about the architecture. It's about the mindset. But they have a pretty decent grab bag of things. A lot of the emphasis, and this would have been very off-putting for me, is a lot of the stuff sort of is like psytrance this, psytrance that. Okay, whatever. But I actually think I encountered this. I saw this on KVR Audio, just sort of having a look. Oh, what's new? What's happening? And I think I saw it in a discount spot, and just something made me think, let's have a closer look. So the page itself, okay, it looks like another tape deck, and this is why I was a little surprised that I thought I'm going to have a listen to this, because I've listened to all these tape decks, and you know what? I don't own any of them. I even made my own analog tape kind of thing, and I don't use it. So there was a lot of reasons that this wasn't going to be of interest, but something just kept making me go, try it. So, okay, all right, tried it. I did notice it's not just another plug-in with an inaudible sort of effect designed for audiophile mix engineers. I'm not an audiophile mix engineer, let me tell you that. I don't think I saw that before I was really driven to try this. But I thought, what the hell, downloaded it, and I was like, that's actually kind of cool. There's something about it that I liked. But this is true. The reason I've highlighted that is that, yes, this doesn't have the same kind of outcomes as we'd get if we were to insert big name here, tape thing. This is a little wilder, and I think in a good way. The fact that they don't necessarily seem to have tried to emulate any particular piece of gear is probably good, because I think ultimately what they've done is they've created their own sound goodifier, which happens to have tape reels swinging away as we go. In terms of pricing, it is, well, as I say, I saw it on sale. How long this sale's lasting for, I think this is a relatively new product. Hopefully it doesn't last forever. We know that's not a good plan, boys and girls. So Euro 38.90, currently 19.90. What that translates into US dollars, I think they're reasonably even. So 40 or 20 in rand numbers. So I'll ask the question, is it worth $40? Clams, shells, attractive naked ladies, is it worth 40 of them? Bottom line, I think it is, if you enjoy the sound that it brings, and with a decent amount of controls, there's a fair versatility to the sound that it can bring once you get your head around understanding what they do and how they affect each other. Which means that now that leads us to what seems like my favourite part of the program, but actually isn't, the good and bad. So what's good, and what might be the limits of the Analog Tape ASX-72? Bottom line, I think it adds a nice feel. Right from the get-go, I felt like this adds a nice feel. You put it onto a sound, you pull in sound into Reason and start it playing, and it's like, okay, it's a little flat. Drop this fellow on it. Oh, it sounds like there's movement, depth. It sounds a bit more alive. Great. That's the whole idea. Bottom line, we could finish there. It has a nice character. Sometimes a character's not what you want, but this is the nature of tape. Tape is nasty. Nasty, nasty, nasty stuff. It's about compromises. Now, if you can work out how to be happy with the compromises, then tape can actually deliver wonderful results. This is not tape. This is digital stuff. But because it's got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things going on at once, there is that kind of feel that you get out of analog gear, because in the analog world, there are every single part of the chain, every component is adding some kind of a mess to what you're doing. Now, here's a real turnaround for the books. I actually think that the presets are great. Not because they all sound good, a lot of them sound terrible, but because they give you a very quick access to different sonic characters. And I get the impression that that was their idea of their presets far more than anything else, to say, here, we can give you this sonic character, we can give you that sonic character. So as a sound goodifier, which makes it a little bit more of a splaturator than a saturator, then I think that it's actually quite a charm to be able to pull it in, flip through some different characteristics, and go, yeah, look, that's probably a little bit more what I'm looking for, and move along. Where I have rubbished that to high heaven everywhere else, I'm actually doing a turnabout here and saying, I kind of like that. So we have to also look and say, are there some limits? Are there some downsides? Are there some god-awful things that we should wish they had never done and they should feel embarrassed about? Okay, so there's really only two. One is calibration. Where is 0 dB? So I've got absolutely no sense. We can reset to default value, but I don't think those default values are 0 dB. So initially, if trying to say, well, okay, I want to balance what's coming in with what's coming out and all of that, it's a shifting sands kind of a thing. And as a company who talk about being mastering engineers themselves, I kind of wonder why they couldn't have put a grease pencil mark or something, to say this is officially 0 in and this is officially 0 out. Of course, we know that they're not, because by the time you've done all this stuff, there's no way of knowing where these things are. But just that I feel it's a little hard to know where calibration is. There is also no manual. It's easy to go, but you just wiggle the knobs, dude. But each of these is a little bit of a thought through process, and I think they have been thought through, in which case, explaining what they do, how they work, there is a couple of lines on their site, but they are poor English at best, and tend not to tell you anything other than either Captain Obvious or something that's obscure and obtuse. So, boys, my biggest negative, after than the how do we calibrate this thing, or know where we should be starting, is that how do we know what we're doing? And I'm not a random nog wibbler, nor am I somebody who likes to go, well, this is exactly what but I like to understand what's going on inside. And for $40, while that's kind of cheap, and I think a really nice price for what you have on offer here, make a manual, invest in somebody who will understand and be able to translate across to the user what they're doing when they're wiggling each one of these knobs and how these knobs are going to relate to each other. Otherwise, you're putting down what I think is an interesting product, a little bit of a unique product, and then not helping people to get the most out of it, which means that people will get it, they'll play with it a couple of times, feel like they don't really know how to get the most out of it, and then wander away. Which you might go, what does it matter, because I got my 39 or my 40, whatever, naked lovely ladies. But, I think you want people to come back for another thing. Look, this thing was so great. The analog tape ASX-72 was so wonderful. I now want to go have a look at their other devices. So your call, but everybody, lack a manual, not the smartest way of doing it. If you're using beta testers, maybe one of those beta testers is open to helping you with the manual. I know where I've beta tested, and the developer has been really cool with me. I have done manuals and I've done things. Engage, get this stuff done. It makes the difference between a plugin that gets used 4 times and abandoned, or a plugin that comes across as supremely professional. I will say, and these are not negatives, they're merely questions, is some people might feel like, well, what's this accurate to? Is this accurate to anything? I don't think it's accurate to anything. And as I've said before, I think that might be a good thing, where insert big name tape deck claims to be a something or other. This, I think, is just like, oh, we like the sound of this, we like the feel of this, we've done that. Cool. And the spinning reels. It might be nice to have a little option somewhere or other to be able to turn this off. And I don't mean this. I mean to be able to leave the power to the whole device, like to keep it not bypassed, but to be able to stop the wheels from spinning because they can be distracting. Not end of the world, but again, in a sort of more professional setting, especially seeing these are not completely round, which is normal, then provide people the option to turn that off, bearing in mind that a high percentage of mix engineers are somewhere on the autism, ADHD, neurodivergent spectrum. Having these things spin can be a real problem. Yes, they make us feel all kind of like tapey, but they can also be like, oh my God, phew, thank God they're not spinning anymore. Little things, boys and girls. Moving forward to its features and what it does. Let's first just run through the individual sounds in here and the effect that we have gotten. So we have our drum loop. Remember, it wasn't looking for big moves here. Bass. There's quite a big leap here. There's a real sort of feeling of movement change as this comes in. And that's the whole idea. My mindset when I was doing this was, okay, I'm sitting on my floor or in the small studio, the second studio where I was trained, and I've got some synths and a drum machine, and I'm putting this whole thing down to tape. Is this giving me more like what would have happened? Synth. Actually, this is where I started with this instrument. Oh, better recover this. Puts a nice sense of dimension and less sort of flat and perfect onto that. Nice work. And then our arpeggiator. This is going into the echo, so the echo is going into the tape. In theory, we could have it the other way around. Not hearing any audible difference as such. Off. Oh, not massive difference, but we hear just again that sort of extra little bit of dimension of softness. Digital is very accurate. That can make it hard. Reason is incredibly accurate. They're brutally accurate. They're like the NS10 of DAWs. And that's a great thing if you know how to be in control of that. If not, then you're just going to go, oh, it sounds terrible. It's just because you haven't learned to mix yet. So this is where these sorts of things can be very nice, adding that little bit of dimension at the beginning. Now, my approach here was to make each of these sounds kind of nice, but remembering that as a mix engineer, the last thing that I should be doing when composing, tracking, is overworking my sound. So there's no EQ, there's nothing but what you see here. On off for our tape unit, and it gives us a nice sort of makes it a little bit nicer to work with, makes that sound feel a little bit more real as we work. So I can pull in an instrument, start working, so I go, okay, yeah, I think I know where I'm going, I think I know what I want from this, drop on the analog tape, and go, okay, now it feels a little bit more like a real thing than that very brutally honest thing that comes out of the DAW. We've already gone through the reverb and the master. So let's actually pull these off so that we're only hearing the one stage and look through the device. Certain things are easier to hear on drums if we're looking for just being able to hear it. Certain things are easier to hear on melodic instruments. We have our drums out. Initially, I will admit, I thought these might have been impulse responses, and it was kind of going to put me off the thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'll try it, but I'll leave those out of it. I was also confused because current sound, I thought maybe this was like some sort of A-B type thing. No, current sound is a patch, as in we've got all these different eras of sound and what have you, and current sound has ended up at the top. Odd naming, but whatever, you get used to it. We've then got these different options. Off, current sound, dusty tape. It's a wee bit hissy, but with the right sound, that will add value. If you think it's too hissy, back it off. But the hiss does add dimension to the work. Yeah, it's like hi-hats up here, and it's like, scratchy. Sounds nice. Again, in headphones, too much hiss, but on speakers you won't notice it. Nice. Pretty bright, but it's not that scratchy bright. Modern sound, how I hate that. But it is a sound. Ultra dirty tape. Got a nice sort of dubby kind of feel to it. As is with the modern sound, it's just A-B. Off. Very flat and brittle up top. Warms up. Ultra fat tape. This can add a lot of beef. That's just bad, but it can have its advantages. This one you don't really hear fully because drums are too transient to actually hear that this is really warbly. That's just, wow. It sounds like my old cassette 4-track on a good day. So the presets are actually nice and of value. We shall quickly run through those again on synth. Yeah, how that sort of tightens everything up, makes it less thin and brittle up top. Changes the sound quite dramatically. Similar, but a thinner sound overall, which is good, because if you push this too much fatness into the mix, you can have problems if it's not what the sound needs. We're still hearing a lot of the brighter parts of the digital sound, but not in a thin or screechy sort of chalkboard way. Brings a nice sort of airiness to that sound by kind of moving away a certain amount of the bottom end while still keeping an overall nice character. You can hear a bit of to Gary Newman for Gary Newman. You can hear that. Now, the presets kind of have a charm of their own in the sense that, as I said before, you bring in your sound, you start working on your sound. You can feel in the digital environment that it's hard to want to engage with that sound. You could drop in something like this that has got a lot of processes going on, so your sound starts to feel like, oh, this is something real. I can sort of touch it. I feel like how I can move it around, more than that feeling of it being sort of flattened. Let's go back up to drums, open this up, and work our way through the knobs. There are quite a lot of them, and I think that's one of the reasons this works out nicely, because there are a lot of functions. So we start with our drive and warmth control. Again, we got no sense of, well, where's 0? It'll go from nothing to... Now, generally, a tape deck input doesn't go down to nothing, or at least that's not my memory of it, but I would have never been in a situation where I was looking to do fade outs on the tape. Not from there. Sliders. Not necessarily wrong that it goes to 0, just where's 0? As in, this is the level you are feeding us, now we're asking you to push more. Maybe it's in the middle, I don't know. If I control click, it puts me there, which is not even on this line. So hard to know. But nonetheless, this is the level you're pushing into the plugin. It doesn't have a lot of gain. So you haven't got like 4,000 dB of gain onto the beginning of the plugin. drive and warmth, because this is going to define how the saturation or the drive things within this are going to behave. So it sets up the gain structure for everything that's happening inside the plugin. So as such, you can just say, okay, I'll just keep pushing, but there's going to be a tendency to just go, oh, well, I'll just turn it up fully loud, dude. We then have this fatness knob. I don't know what the fatness knob is doing. It's definitely adding bottom end. It's also adding level. But it sounds good, so long as you don't make the mistake of just going, because it's kind of thoughtless. So you will find generally a little bit of gain in here. A little bit of gain here will just give you a punchier signal overall. But don't see the tape unit about adding bass. That's what your EQ should be for. Use it for adding body. There's a difference. We then got flutter and wow. This is partly where I think I'm not sure whether these are modelled on anything or even modelled on the science of what did happen broadly with tape. Flutter is generally pretty bright. Let's see if we can brighten this up just to see if we can hear what's happening. Flutter's prone to adding a little bit of a squeal. In a sense, it's a very fast movement. You can actually see scalloped tape, and that flutters really badly. It's a little harder to hear what that's doing, but I don't have a problem with that. Wow, we're not going to hear super well here. Wow tends to be the wander that we hear. While lo-fi hipsters have this whole sort of, the tape was always like this, it was not like that unless there was something horrendously wrong with your deck. My cheap-ass Sony Walk person that I carried around in my bum bag with my little buds as I rode my bicycle like a maniac. It didn't wow in any noticeable sort of a way. So my advice here will be a little bit of drive, a little bit of wow. You may have noticed, particularly on the bass here, that it just sort of somehow felt a little bit more real than this sort of kind of digital synth that was trying to be analogy. The wow was probably the biggest factor in that, in the sense that it just provides a little bit of movement. So rather than our sound being exactly the same, it's just moving. So a little bit of wow, and you might as well have a little bit of flutter. The flutter doesn't behave the same way as what I'm used to with things, but I'm not going to say that it's bad or wrong. But wow is probably more of what you're going to use, so might as well say the same, and that way you've got just a little bit of movement that you will feel a bit on tape, but you'll hear it a lot more on melodic type sounds. Bias. Bias is not explained here at all, but the bias should be, and appears to be from things that I've heard, simply the same as with a tube, that when it's down, or here, because I think it's only a unipolar bias, not a bipolar bias. A bipolar bias means that bias would be sort of perfect and clean here, so you'd be getting a clean kind of distortion, which means really just the overtones, no splat. And as we moved to either side, we would get more splat, it would get dirtier. I think that this is unipolar, meaning clean overtones, splattier. I have felt like it gets splattier. As we move that way. So if you're looking to stay clean on the drive side of things, then keep your bias right down. If you're looking to kind of grunge it up a little bit, then raise your bias. But remember, this isn't a distortion. It's not like a fuzz pedal. These are not meant to get ugly. Feedback. Not fully explained, but something that does happen is that you can get a feedback, as in the sound that you're hearing can be coming back again a little bit. This is not meant to be a delay unit, so you don't get, but you can feed the signal back into itself a little bit, and it does add a little bit more body. It is messing up and munging up the signal a little bit, but hey, welcome to the real world. You wanted things to not sound like a door. So a little bit of feedback, what do they default themselves at? 100%. I'm not sure whether all their default values are entirely useful, but adding a little bit of feedback, and I'm not sure where this feedback is coming from, what it's feeding back. Is it feeding back what's going out the output? In which case the feedback amount could be driven by the output amount as well. But feedback means that we're simply putting the signal back into itself, and it will add a little bit of fullness. Drive. Now you've got drive option again, not explained, so how hard things are driving. In which case, yeah, we can definitely hear our bias there is getting furry or splatty, as expected. We can hear that with the feedback high, we do get a sense of more body. Things become a little less defined, which is to be expected. If we're feeding the signal back in, we are sort of mushing our transients up as well. Also, if we're putting a bit more signal in, then we're pushing hard against any kind of transient-y devices or functions that are going on in here. But a little bit of feedback in tape type situation can give you a nicer, smoother, glued kind of a sound. It's sort of like a reverb, but not. So we can choose between a high amount of drive or a low amount of drive, which does seem to influence our signal. What this is measuring, I don't know. Oh, it's output. It's measuring output. Which is fair enough. That's sort of what we would expect. We've then got our emphasis. This one is not super well explained. It's better explained than most things. But tape has a habit, especially when we're abusing it like this, of making things mushy. You can hear here, bright and sharp, kind of a bit mushier. So we've lost high end, but we've also lost the pin sharpness of a lot of transients. Now that's in many ways what we're looking for. We want a more smooth man kind of a signal, but that can provide some problems. That's the downside, the nasty side of tape, where it makes things sound muddy. So the emphasis control seems to be about, hey, let us undo some of the nasty things that we've done. What's happening inside here? I think they're sort of putting down a secret sauce. I would like it a bit better explained. So, sort of 100% tapey dude, to allowing some of the brightness and transients to come back through. But I have a feeling that that's not a wet-dry mix. It may be, but I have a sneaky feeling that may not be exactly what's happening here, that you change the sound that you get out of here. So if you feel like, oh yeah, I want the fatness in, but then you listen to your mix and you go, oh, it's just too kludgy, then you can open things back up. Again, where they default to isn't entirely useful. It's not, doesn't seem to be 50-50, but you can sort of balance or bias the tone that you're hearing overall. Speaking of tone, there is this choice between A421 or C24. No doubt they are taken off the types of tape. Tape C24 or 421. So C24, one would assume, was an older type of tape, which really is not kind to your high end. It is, well, sort of unpleasant. Does it make it wrong? No. But if you're looking for a more warmed up kind of sound, then C24 is going to do that. I'm not sure that I'll ever use that, but it is there. Because I think one of the problems with doing that, or if you're sort of saying, oh, I want my bass to be bassier, is I think you'll then struggle to pull it through the mix because you'll end up with this really warm, muddy sound that seems kind of cool on its own in solo when there's nothing fighting. But once you put it into a mix, I think you're then going to go, ugh. And then you'll do all kinds of things to try to undo it. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's merely a caution to not use that the wrong way. Clip and limiting are not explained at all. I don't understand what this is doing. If we're pushing in hard, let's get rid of the bias. Is this providing some sort of clip at some point? Fair enough, tape does clip, but to have a sense of, well, which way does this knob operate? Is there no clipping happening here? Is this fully clipped here? Many clippers work backwards. So in terms of calibration, again, this is sort of kind of lets us down a little bit. I have no problems per se with there not being any marks on here, but nothing in the manual means that it's that sort of, yeah, I don't know how to use this knob. To say, oh, just use your ears, man, is it's not the best way. I think there is more clipping as we turn it up, but in what way? What's its actual function? It makes these knobs less useful. There's a limiter. Okay, it's really crushing our signal, which tape is prone to doing, for sure. The question is, again, what's it doing? What's its overall sort of feeling of? Draw me some pictures to give me a sense of, at here, what's happening. I hope and assume that here is no impact whatsoever, and here it's like hammer of the miserable gods, because we can see our output level going down, but then at the same time our audible level doesn't seem to be changing. So we're very much working on the transients here, but we're not hearing a big difference. It does something, and it's interesting, but these two in particular I really would like to understand better. What are they doing so that I can choose much better about how I want to control them? Being, oh, it's only ears, dude. Yeah, no, it's not only ears, dude. This dude likes to actually understand what is happening between there and there, so that I can not only use my ears, but also use my common sense. Because if it's only ears, dude, then we're just going to do this and go. And then when we get to the mix, we're going to go, yeah, but this is a smashed mess. I can't make it balance nicely. So please give us some sense of what these things are actually doing. Hiss. Let's just back this down a little bit. It's a steady, solid state hiss, which does actually alter. So the hiss is being inserted at the beginning of the chain. So whatever we do changes the hiss. I wonder if that's the nature of tape. Could well be. We shouldn't be getting hearing distortion on that. Interesting, changes tones, to be expected. But you can add or subtract your hiss. At pretty high, yeah, it's a bit unpleasant, but such is the nature of tape, so this is to be expected. Oh, I missed these ones here, the 15 and 30 IPs. I'm not sure whether that should influence the hiss noise. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure on that. But basically, let's get our drums running again. Inches per second will change the quality of tape. Let's go to the higher quality tape. And of course, cassette was 7.5 inches per second. Again, I'm not sure how accurate these choices are, but if you're looking for darker, then yes, we're getting into nasty cassette territory for sure. But saying I don't want any hiss or hiss is going to ruin my mix is not a wise call. What do they say? Well, they seem to default to 100%. A little bit of hiss is a good thing in a mix. You will want to do a fade out at the end of your track, in which case that means that you don't necessarily have to be giving people hiss between tracks. You may choose to as a stylistic thing, and at the beginning of your track, you've either already got a fade in, or as the music starts, that will be, to most situations, masking the hiss. I'm not recommending that you go out there and put down records that have so much hiss that they can't be masked. That's a stylistic choice of some debate, but a little bit of hiss in a mix actually helps the mix to feel more real. So don't think that that's the enemy. A bit of hiss is actually a good call. Don't use it as just a fashion thing and go, look how fashionable and hipster I am, because look, I can prove how lo-fi I am. Running a little bit of hiss in the bottom of a mix is a surprisingly good thing. Don't believe me? Fine, not a problem. Test this yourself. Get a white noise source. Any synthesizer will do. Just pure white noise. Don't mess about with filtering it or anything. You can play with that later. And do nothing fancy at all in your mix. Just have an A/B where you can turn this hiss in and out. You will find that with a little bit of hiss in the mix, suddenly your mix feels that little bit nicer. Do it. That's our speed, and our output, which we've established goes from nothing to, I think that might be 0 dB. I'm not sure that it has any gain, and we've probably worked out the nature of the power button switch, which kind of works upside down, but some old gear did work upside down, so it's the only way right now to turn those reels off. We click on this or this, it takes us to their site. That one too does. We can get into saving presets and banks and stuff, all of the usual kinds of things. That is the device as such. Now this is an hour already, so you might feel like that's an awful lot for a device of this type. But I really want to help people to understand what I've come to understand from the device, because, well, that's honouring the fact that they've said, hey, here, have a copy of this so that you can review it fully, rather than just going, yeah, it's great, go get it. So to give you a much greater sense of how you might use it, especially seeing the manual's not fully there. And yeah, bottom line, I think that it's a very interesting device in that you've heard it changing the drums here, and it does it in a way which feels different, and I think in a sense, in its own unique way, more authentic than many of the other here splatterate your drums or splatterate your sounds. Let's just put that back in the mix. Flat drums. Just brings a lot more oomph to them. We could have equally gone through and done the whole thing with each of these individual sounds. And it would have been interesting. Like if you didn't want to hear that digitally sort of thing in there, which was deliberate that I put it in, then we can look at the lower quality versions of this. That's kind of bringing that art in many ways because we're driving it now. Let's drive this a little bit harder, might get louder. Yeah, we can hear it start to shred there. So it can become an interesting kind of a drive unit as well. Not a death metal type thing, but you can push your sounds into it and start to burr them or get them ragged. And the results do feel to me different and in some ways far more, again, authentic, not clone of, but authentic to an old-fashioned real-worldy kind of thing than that sort of very generic sound that I hear come out of so many sound goodifier devices. It's like they've already said this is what your sound is going to be because it's the modern sound and therefore that's all you're going to get. That puts me off because it's like make every sound like every other sound. And it's like if I wanted to sound like every Nine Inch Nails record, you know what? Well, I don't. So what appealed to me about this was that with those presets, there's a variety of feels that it's easier to dial in, but more importantly, once you get your head around balancing the controls, which I can't fully say I have because they're undocumented, there is the ability to get this kind of nice feel that isn't that, oh, here, let's help you sound like every approved record in EDM or Nine Inch Nails or whatever. It's a more natural kind of a result. So overall, I like it. I haven't had it long enough to say, yeah, dude, it's going to be a go-to. But using it through here, or using it enough to say, oh, I'd like to actually put this one up. Using it through here and using it through the other thing that I did where it was really just sitting on the masters, kept sort of flipping and going, is this a win? And every time it was a win. So my final words are, well, largely already given, for, let's say, full price, 40 whatevers. It's well worth a try and to see, does it fit into how you go? If you're thinking, is this going to suddenly make me sound like Armin van Buuren pretending to sound like Nine Inch Nails pretending? No, I don't think it will, and I think that's a good thing about it. Is it going to make me sound like real tape? Technically, probably no. In terms of, are we trying to clone some exact tape unit because that's the only way to be cool? No. But does it behave in the same sorts of ways that tape and things of that era behaved? I feel like it does. So it's authentic in its own way. So in terms of saying, hey, can I bring a feeling of real to sort of de-flatten paperify the DAW environment and the sounds that I'm bringing in, hell yes. I'm very pleased so far with the feel that it brings in that sense. And again, I say, I think it's just a result of doing 6 or 7 things at once so that our signal's always being kind of not as even as it was. And that's very representative of the real world. Everything from older DACs, digital analog converters in DX7s and Casio CZs and what have you. They were not the same every time. They were wandery, jittery. This just goes nicely, as you heard me push the bass there, start to really make this thing kind of grind, and it delivered a nice result which was far more real worldy than that funny modern digital kind of sound that people are looking for. So at $20, yeah, it's great value. At $40, if you can understand, and when you understand and can get a feel of how to get the results that you want from it, which is not that hard, but then bearing in mind, I have to say I have 30 years of experience in this, which a lot of people buying these sorts of things don't. But nonetheless, 40 is still worth it. It would definitely be worth it if it had a manual, and a manual that was helping people to get the most out of the device, but it's still worth it. I've enjoyed my time with it, and I think that I'm going to continue to enjoy bringing it into things, whether that's just on a master or whether that's just where I've got a sound and I feel like, I want to get that moving pretty quickly. Because I get my sounds moving, but often with quite a few layers of things, not because I think that you should have lots of layers of processing, but this is sort of a quick way to suddenly go, oh, okay, I've sort of de-dawed it. Really happy. I hope you have found this useful. G-Sonic people, I hope that you have also found it productive. Again, just your biggest downside here being that you're bringing this really nice character that feels very authentic, but I can't calibrate your device, which is not the biggest issue, but the lack of manual to help me work out how to calibrate and what's going on is a flaw in your attack, especially if hoping to get people who are wanting to be more thoughtful about how your device works than just another, we'll whack this Sandgooner on and in 2 weeks forget about it and go buy another one. Because chances are they'll go buy it from someone else. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. You want them to look at your next Sandgooner or various other devices you've got and go, these guys helped me get there. I've been very open to Casio, even though I've never got a second one. I've been super open to Casio and super open to EMU because their manuals helped me learn my craft in the early days. Been distracted myself, but I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you have found value in this, not only in possibly looking at this device as something that you take into your life, but also always trying to give you advice on how to mix, how to approach doing what you do. So even if this isn't the device for you, you can take what you've learned and apply it elsewhere. Don't forget higherhertz.com, where you can, of course, get your sticky fingers on the ever lovely, very blue Hertz delay for free. And there's other information there as well. If you have questions, broad questions about the material here, hit subscribe and pop the question down below. Most importantly, go out, try this. Have a great day.